Hey Amarillo, I'm Jason Boyett, and you're listening to Hey Amarillo, the interview podcast featuring some of the most interesting people and stories of Amarillo, Texas. Today's guest is Steve Burton. Steve is the Executive Director of Children's Learning Centers of Amarillo, an organization that provides quality, low-cost childcare to the people of this area, regardless of whether or not they can pay. And Children's Learning Centers serves more than 600 kids a day from multiple locations. And on April 1st, this organization will turn 100 years old. Steve has been involved with this nonprofit since 2002. And before that, he had a career working with the Boys and Girls Clubs in Colorado and then at the Maverick Club here in Amarillo. He's also an on-ice hockey official, and he's deeply involved with the local hockey community. So we cover that. We cover a lot of territory in this episode. Here's Steve Burton. Steve Burton, welcome to the Hey Amarillo podcast. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm honored to have you. I want to start with you the same way I start with all my guests, and that's just to ask why you're here in Amarillo. So what brought you to this area in the first place?
I moved to Amarillo in 1997 to be the executive director of the Maverick Boys and Girls Club.
Okay, moved from where?
Roundabout way, Colorado Springs, Rocky Ford, Colorado, Brownwood, Texas to here.
Okay, grew up
in Colorado Springs.
Okay.
Grew up Colorado Springs, graduated from high school there, Doherty High School. Not even going to tell you the year because it was a long time ago. And went to college in Gunnison, Colorado.
Okay.
And I was fortunate enough to finish in 4 years. And now that I look back at that time in my life, I'm like, I should have taken at least 6 or 7. Yeah. Because it was a wonderful place.
Yeah, going to school in Colorado.
In the mountains of Colorado. We'd go skiing 3 or 4 days a week. I probably, my freshman year, I probably skied more days than most people get to ski their whole lifetime.
Wow.
So,
did you, when you went to college, did you know like what you wanted to do? Did you have a career plan?
I knew I was going to be involved in business somehow, so I did receive a business degree in management and finance, and served me well.
Okay, I know you got into the nonprofit world.
Yes.
Pretty quickly. Like, was it right after college, or did you have some other years?
It was pretty close after college. I was fortunate. My dad was executive director of the Boys and Girls Clubs in Colorado Springs.
Okay.
And I was flying her a little bit after college. He really didn't know what I wanted to do. Tried insurance. I was a stockbroker for a little bit. Commission only. That was tough.
That's rough. Yeah.
That's tough. And that was right after the crash of '89.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was difficult. So he said, hey, why don't you come work with me part-time at the club and we'll go from there. I'm like, okay. And next thing you know, he says, hey, there's an opening for an executive director of the Boys and Girls Club of Lower Arkansas Valley in Rocky Ford. I'm like, well, where's Rocky Ford? He's the one's down southeast. I'm like, I've never even heard of it. He's like, well, you ought to look at it. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, what would I do in Rocky Ford, Colorado? And he goes, well, what are you doing here? That's a good point. So I applied for it, I got it, and that started my career in the nonprofit.
Was it a smaller organization significantly than what you were doing?
Yeah, it was a startup. Okay. So they received some funding to
so it was just getting started.
Just getting started. Right. The city had a building down there that we converted. It was an old Iowa International Order of Odd Fellows Hall, which was built in 1892.
Wow.
So when I first there, we renovated it and made it into a Boys and Girls Club, and a game room and a weight room and a boxing ring. There was a boxing program we had there. And then upstairs we had a library and classrooms and kitchen and everything. And it was a good program. It was fun. It was good for me being a young 20-year-old something, his first real job. It was a good experience.
I've talked to people who followed in a family business, not anybody who followed like a family sort of nonprofit organization pathway. Like, was there any resistance to you being like, yeah, I don't want to do what my dad did. I want to try something else.
Not really.
Or did you like fall in love with it once you got into that work?
Yeah, I fell in love with it.
Okay.
Especially the kids, working with the kids. I loved working with the kids. And I was the only employee. So, I did all the fundraising, all the, the financial stuff. I did all the programming. I did everything. So it was fun. And the club was right on Main Street across from City Hall. And Rocky Ford's an agricultural community. So there were a lot of migrant workers that came through and a lot of kids there that didn't speak English and didn't have a whole lot of money. And so they just come by and come into the club, and we play pool or foosball or whatever. And when I first started, I may have had 10 or 12 kids come in a day. And by the time I moved on to my next gig, I had over 100 kids coming in that club every day. So it was amazing.
So you mentioned moving on. I know that is what brought you to Texas.
Yes.
Not yet Amarillo, though.
Not yet Amarillo.
Right.
So I went from Rocky Ford, and I was asked to start up another club in Brownwood, Texas, to start a ground up build. And I did the same thing in Brownwood as I did in Rocky Ford.
Okay.
And it was another good experience. And from there, I was recruited by some people to come up. I didn't actively seek the position, but I was recruited pretty heavily to come up and take over the Maverick Boys and Girls Club.
So that's interesting to me because, there's a big difference between having started a couple of smaller community boys and girls clubs and then coming into the Maverick, which had Boys and Girls Club in its name, but like that organization dated back to the 1930s, I think.
32.
Yeah. And so it had so much history, so much tradition,
Absolutely.
a whole lot of alumni who still lived here. Like, what was that experience like?
It was, it was different. It was different than having a new club. But, where I grew up in the boys' clubs because my dad used to take me down when I was out of school. I'd go to work with him, and I'd play with, I'd be in the programs. And the boys' clubs of Colorado Springs started in 1897.
Okay.
So that had a lot of tradition as well. So I was accustomed to it, and I kind of knew how to navigate it. So I loved it. I absolutely loved the tradition of the Maverick. I loved it.
I imagine there's, for somebody who's going to be the executive director of a place like the Maverick Club, that there's the work with the kids, and then there's also a little bit of politics to figure out. You've got to figure out the community. You've got to find your way because you're coming as an outsider into a culture that has a lot of insiders.
Absolutely. There was a lot of palm pressing, a lot of bridge repairs, a lot of bridge building, satisfying some groups that have been involved in the organization for many, many years. And trying to appease everybody there was little tap dancing here and there, and maybe a little country swing, and it was interesting.
A good experience, though.
Absolutely.
I know it lasted just a few years.
6 years.
6 years. Okay.
Over 6 years. Yeah, and you and I can see it. Like my presence, but I don't have any.
You're pointing at your bald head.
My bald. I don't have any hair on my head, and that's one of the main reasons. Next to genetics,
okay.
Yeah, one of the main reasons why I don't have hair on my head anymore.
Before we move on to what you did after the Maverick Club, I do know a little bit about your history and that you've got a lot of experience in the world of hockey.
I do.
I think as a player, but also as a referee. I wonder if you could tell me a little bit about that.
Sure. I played hockey growing up. I played for my high school team, which was in Colorado as a varsity sport, and then went to college and thought I was going to play in college. Well, I went to Western State College in Gunnison, Colorado. And if anybody has been to Gunnison to go to Crested Butte skiing or whatever, they know it's very cold in Gunnison.
Yes.
We had an outdoor rink.
Okay.
I didn't last long because it was cold. If you've ever seen the movie Mystery Alaska, that was it. And so I didn't skate until that was in 85. My last time skating in college.
Okay.
And then I didn't skate again until 97 until I moved to Amarillo.
Okay, to Amarillo.
Yeah, and I've learned after 12 years, I didn't skate as well as I used to. So I kind of had to learn how to skate all over again. And I figured, well, to get more ice time, they need referees, so I guess I'll go and referee. Okay. I got certified and everything. And turns out I was pretty good at it. I got my skating back to where it was. And started doing upper level games, high school travel games, high school games, Bantams. And I was working a high school hockey tournament here in Amarillo. And one of the referees of the Central Hockey League, who was living here, the league had apartments in different locations throughout where guys stayed. And it was centrally located, especially, Amarillo was centrally New Mexico, Oklahoma, Lubbock, and serve a lot of different venues. And he saw me working a game. I think I was refereeing. I was wearing the orange armbands on that one, and he sat and watched me. I guess I didn't see him, but he he stayed there till after the game and talked to me. He's like, "Have you ever thought about applying to refereeing the Central Hockey League? We need these guys." I'm like, "Well, nope, never even crossed my mind." He's like, "Well, you should put my name down as a reference. Tell him I sent you." I'm like, "Okay." So I sent my resume in and put him as a reference, and he vouched for me. I got invited to training camp, and next thing you know, I was working games in Central Hockey League.
Was it still sort of a side gig, like while you were doing everything else? Like that's not a full-time thing until you get really high up in the pros, right?
There were full-time guys in that league. Most of them were for Canada.
Okay.
That was post 9/11, so right after 9/11, it was very difficult for them to get visas.
Sure, yeah.
Canadians get visas to come down and work. So probably my third or fourth year in the league, transitioned more to Americans. Because my first year, it was very rare we had an all-American crew.
Okay.
It was more common that I was the only American on a Canadian crew.
Interesting.
Yeah. So all those full-time guys, most of them were from Canada.
I have a lot of respect for hockey officials because I feel like me right now, if I knew all the rules and stuff like that, I could go out and referee a basketball game. You can run up and down the court.
Yeah.
Might not be able to keep up, but like I could do it. I couldn't be a hockey official because I can't skate. It requires like a separate skill set beyond just standing on your feet. You know?
It's required to be able to skate.
Yeah. But that does seem like either a barrier to entry or a way to really set apart referees is saying, this is somebody who really has to know what they're doing.
Right. Yeah, and there's some entry level stuff, working with the younger kids, the 8-year-olds, 10-year-olds, some 12-year-olds. There are a lot of adults now that are learning to play hockey locally. And so a lot of those guys want to be more involved in it, and they want to referee. And so my job, I'm supervisor of officials here for the Wranglers Association.
Okay.
And my job is to guide those new officials through the whole first year process because it's not an easy process. Yeah. There's a lot of pressures coming at you from all over the place, coaches, players, parents. It's a difficult sport to navigate if you're new.
Okay. But it's growing a lot in Amarillo. Like you've been here since the 90s.
Yes.
So you've seen that trajectory, which right now is probably the best that it's ever been.
It's strong. I mean, there are 4 different leagues, adult leagues.
Okay.
An A, a B, a C, and a D league. D league is for the learn to play.
Right.
We have games. There's 6 adult games on Sunday. There's 2 adult league games on Monday, 1 on Tuesday, 2 on Wednesday, 1 on Thursday.
Okay.
It's amazing how much it's grown, and I contribute that to having the second sheet of ice.
Yeah, the ice ranch.
The ice ranch. A group of guys that used to play professional hockey here in Amarillo got together and formed the ice ranch. I can't remember if it was the Bulls or the Wranglers. Anyways, they got together. A lot of those guys, finished their playing career, stayed here, got jobs elsewhere, and decided, they wanted to expand the program because that's what they grew up with.
Right. Guys like Austin Sutter,
who's
been on this podcast.
Jason Chafe, a bunch of guys that stayed in Amarillo after their professional days were over. And they did a great job getting that up and going. Having that second sheet of ice 12 months out of the year, it's a game changer.
Yeah, because it's not like you can replicate ice skating very well without ice.
No.
Rollerblades are not the same thing.
No, we used to have the ice from October to March, and there was no hockey at all.
Yeah.
Between March and October, and I used to have to go to training camp for the Central Hockey League the first week of October. Well, I raced bicycles, I rode bicycles and everything, so I was always in good shape, but I wasn't in hockey shape. So I never failed. The first skating session, I'd pull a muscle in the groin, hamstring, leg ligament, knee ligament, whatever. I think I missed, out of 6 seasons, I missed 4 out of the 6 training camps because I was hurt the first day, so it was, it helps having ice 12 months out of the year.
Okay. So I guess that'll complete our hockey sidebar. You said you were at the Maverick Club for 6 years.
Yes.
Tell me what happened after that.
I applied to a blind ad in the paper for a human resource person at a nonprofit, and I got it.
Okay.
Because I had a pretty good reputation, and everybody knew I was leaving the Maverick. So without a whole lot of interviewing or whatever, I was basically offered the job.
What was that nonprofit?
Children's Learning Centers.
Okay.
Yep. And so that was I started there February 1st of 2003.
Okay.
22 years ago, and been there ever since. And I wasn't there long as a human resource director. There were some changes. Mm-hmm. The board made changes with the paid leadership. And next thing you know, I was thrown into the interim executive director's role. And then later, soon after, was hired as the executive director and been there ever since.
Okay, so I want to talk about Children's Learning Centers because my perspective is that it's one of those places in Amarillo, and there are a lot that have pretty good name recognition.
Yes.
But unless you benefit directly from their services, you don't really know what it is,
right,
why it's important, what goes on there.
Right.
So I wonder if you could tell me a little bit about the Children's Learning Centers, because I know that this coming year is like the 90th anniversary of this organization.
Close.
100th anniversary.
100th
anniversary of this
years.
Organization. Yeah, which is, there are a lot of organizations that are hitting that milestone the past few years, which is a testament to what was happening in Amarillo in the mid-20s. But like, for something to have been here that long, it speaks to its importance and to the role it plays. So tell me a little bit about that history and what it does.
It started with one. It was called Amarillo Day Nurseries when it first started.
Okay.
And they started with one location, and I'm not really quite sure off the top of my head where that was, but they moved it over to the 401 South Van Buren, where our modern day McClellan Learning Center is.
Okay.
And McClellan is named McClellan because the lady that was in my position for the first, I want to say 35 years of the organization was Mrs. McClellan.
Okay.
She was the I don't know what the title was. I've seen, she was the head teacher. She was the head cook. She was the bill payer.
Okay.
All those things. She did that for I'm pretty sure it was 35 years.
Starting in the 20s?
In the 20s when it began. And we transitioned over to Children's Learning Centers in 1990.
Okay.
1985. I guess I should have researched that before I came on.
We can look it up on the website and confirm it.
And when I took over, we had 8 centers. And I opened up one more, the Curtis Fleming Learning Center over at First Christian Church on Wolfland.
Okay.
Wolfland. They had a childcare center that they were running, got in some trouble with licensing and wanted to lease it out. We looked at it as a good opportunity. So that's the only facility that we lease in Amarillo. The other 6, we're down to 7 now. The other 6, we own outright.
Okay. So. Tell me what the organization is and does right now. Like what it is, beyond locations, like what is the role that you're playing? Is it beyond a nursery for kids, like the original name? It
is, but when you boil everything down to its basics, we take care of kids when parents are at work.
Okay.
Or going to school. That's the basics of it. Now, with that, we have a good curriculum that we use in cooperation with the child care services that provides that and some other organizations. But each individual center has its own curriculum that we follow because there's a lot of different demographics within the city that some of those curriculums don't fit that certain demographic.
Okay.
So we leave it up to our directors, who some of them have been with us almost 40 years.
Wow.
To develop that and implement that that's going to suit their clientele the best.
Who are those clientele? Like, I mean, are you dealing with a lot of people? There's a lot of for-profit preschools and things like that in Amarillo. Yes. Those are not always affordable to everybody.
Right.
Like, is that sort of what Children's Learning Centers is able to provide as a more affordable option? More affordable option.
We are the least expensive childcare in the area.
Okay.
We partner with United Way, who I'll shout out to United Way. They're celebrating their 100th year this year too.
Yeah.
We Children's Learning Centers or Amarillo Day Nurseries and United Way, which was the community chest back then. We were original partners.
Okay.
We're one of the few
at the very beginning.
Children's Learning Centers is one of the few that are still partnered together. But with United Way, we receive funding to subsidize some parents that don't necessarily qualify for other types of funding. They're caught in that bubble of overqualified a little bit for subsidies, but still working poor.
Okay.
So we do receive money from United Way to help those families. We participate in childcare services Rising Star programs. 4 of our 7 centers are 4-star centers, which is the highest achievement you can have within the Rising Star program. And we have an assessment done every year with them, and you have to qualify every single year to be on that program. So something we're proud of. And all our other centers are Rising Star partners with 3 and 2 stars, but we have 4 that are 4 stars. So, but we have our centers that are open to everybody. Most of them are on the north side of town. We have our Curtis Fleming Center, which we opened in 2008 over in the First Christian Church at Wolfland and Georgia, kind of that area. Yeah, we have probably 65% of the parents that use our facilities are on some type of subsidy, and anywhere from 30 to 40% are private pay.
Okay.
So,
have you seen the population of kids that come through the centers change in the 20 plus years you've been there? Like, are kids different? Are there a lot more that maybe don't speak English, or maybe have, like are raised in environments that give them some challenges in what you do?
The main difference that we see, and we had a staff meeting yesterday, we were talking about it, is the dependence on technology.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. The iPads, the iPhones, using those to occupy their minds. And we like to have those. We don't like to have those. We like to
You're not handing those out at the door.
We're not handing those out the door. That can be done at home. But that's the main difference we see in the kids nowadays.
Does that change their ability to, I don't know, entertain themselves, imaginative play, like some of those kinds of things?
The biggest difference is the socialization with other kids. When you're on the iPad, you're basically solo. Mm-hmm. I mean, you're in solitude, focusing on what you're doing. When you have a group of children and group play, and you have to learn how to navigate those situations that all of us have had to navigate. We still have to navigate as adults on how to deal with other people. And a lot of that's getting lost in the technology that is being put in everybody's hands. And not just kids. It's not just kids.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Tell me about some of the challenges that you've had to face in your work. I know the past 5 years have been hard for everybody, but like childcare was like on the forefront of things during the pandemic.
Yes.
Finding workers, protecting kids, protecting families, like all that kind of stuff.
It was challenging, but I look back at that time from March of 2000 until I guess it kind of eased up in middle of 21, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
End of 21.
Eased up, got bad, eased up, got
bad.
And then,
but the requirements for us, I mean, when the pandemic first hit, we decided to stay open. Mm-hmm. It was important for me to lead an organization that had been through world wars.
Yeah.
The Great Depression, stock market crashes, Vietnam conflict, Korea, all those pivotal times in the country's history. What's different?
Well, and a lot of those parents were essential workers.
Absolutely.
And you still got to do something with your kids.
Yeah, and that's all we could care for was essential worker kids at first. So we lost half of our population.
Okay.
And it was one of those things where we had to decide we don't need all the staff that we have. But my thought process was this isn't going to last forever. Mm-hmm. So let's focus on training these caregivers, cut down classroom sizes, get them educated, get them trained properly, and not have 11 2-year-olds in the classroom and trying to train them that way when they're just trying to keep their head above water.
Right.
So we did a lot of different training. We teamed teachers together in smaller classroom settings, and we worked a lot one-on-one with those teachers. It was actually a pretty good time for us as far as retaining employees.
Okay.
Now, the hardest thing was if one of those team teachers got sick or was contacted with, that whole center shut down.
Yeah.
So we had 9 centers at that time, and all 9 of them got shut down at least once, if not twice, and one of them 3 times.
Wow.
So what happens then? 15 days were shut down. What are parents doing?
Right.
What are my staff doing? Well, the staff are quarantined. Their kids can't go to. Do we still pay them? Well, they get 2 weeks. I mean, our policy is 2 weeks of sick time. Well, that went out the window. I'm like,
Right.
we're paying our employees. It didn't matter. We're paying our employees. We just decided we're going to do the right thing. And, the PPP loans came out, and we had all those people on staff. We kept them on staff, and that was one of the requirements of the PPP loan. Did you retain your staff? Yes,
Right.
we did. So we did receive a lot of money from the PPP loans. That kept us floating. Once the pandemic kind of settled down and we can open up fully again, we struggled at that time to get employees back.
Okay.
So we had kids, we had the demand from parents, we didn't have the staff to take them. And that's still the case today.
Yeah. So you're still trying to climb out of
Absolutely.
that hole.
Absolutely.
And I know like childcare positions have been on the front lines because it's one of those things that it tends to be a lower pay, but like you've got to have a real skill to handle a classroom of 12 2-year-olds.
Yes.
And that's just to handle them, much
Yes.
less provide curriculum and learning and all that kind of stuff.
Absolutely. It takes a special person.
Yeah. It's still something where, you're struggling to find the right people to fill those roles today.
Yes.
Is there a solution to that? Like,
Boy, we've been battling this now for several years, and we've increased our starting pay. We've increased everybody's pay. We've had to increase our fees to meet that or pay for that. But boy, it's still tough.
all right. What's the funding situation for the children's learning centers now? Like, is it primarily still United Way, or are there other sources of support?
Our operations funds probably 90% of our budget.
Okay.
We do receive money from United Way. We partner with Childcare Services, which is a program from the Texas WorkSource Commission and Pikes Peak Regional Planning Commission. And other than that, when we have capital projects, like we just renovated our McClellan Center, which was our first center, we renovated our Pavillard Center, and we seek outside funds for those.
Okay.
So,
But most of it is it's the fees that parents pay.
Yes.
That keeps it going.
That's it.
Have you seen a substantial difference? I'm thinking of your work with the Maverick Club, with Boys and Girls Centers before that. And now you're dealing, not with 12-year-olds, but with 2-year-olds. Like, is that a dramatic change in how you go about things, or is it still kind of the same thing?
It's still,
nobody's playing pool with you.
No.
You're not shooting pool or doing boxing or anything like that.
No, and when I was at Maverick, I was administrator. I didn't do any program there. That was the difference between my first 2 Boys and Girls Club jobs to the Maverick, was I was solely an administrator.
Got it.
So moving over from the Maverick to Children's Learning Centers wasn't that different, although raising funds at the Maverick compared to raising funds at Children's Learning Centers, completely different.
Okay, why is that different?
We had to raise funds in order to operate. If we didn't raise funds, we didn't have a program at all. Period. I've been fortunate to where I stepped into the Children's Learning Centers at a time where there was some really good board leadership in previous years, and they did develop some endowments in case something happened, pandemic or whatever, and we needed emergency funds. It's there. So we're financially in good shape, and we're strong. So when I go to ask for something from a foundation or a private donor or whatever, it's going to be taken care of.
Okay.
There's no 100 years, there's no chance, there's always a chance, but it's slim odds that we're just going to pack up and leave.
Okay.
So, you look at some of the organizations that have been here and have left, and I'm not going to throw any names out there, but there have been several big names, nonprofit organizations that couldn't survive and left, pretty bad taste in some people's mouths. We're not that.
Right.
We'll be here for another 100 years.
You grew up in Colorado Springs. You ended up here in Amarillo. People here locally tend to think of places like Colorado Springs, Front Range, all that as like where we go for vacations. You came the opposite way.
Yes.
I wonder if was there any sort of culture shock? Like, did you find anything substantially different living in the mountains, living with Colorado people versus the flat, Texas Panhandle?
Well, that was the main difference, just the geographic location. The biggest culture shock for me was moving from Rocky Ford, Colorado to Brownwood, Texas.
Okay.
That was a tough one.
Both pretty rural.
Both were very rural. and things just moved a lot slower in Brownwood, Texas, and I was not used to it. So, that was the biggest culture shock. But moving from Brownwood to here, not that much of a culture shock. It was a good opportunity for me. I mean, I made substantially amount more money, moving from a small club to a larger club. So it was good for my family. But Amarillo is a pretty tight knit community. It's, everybody says it's a large city, but, it's not as big as everybody thinks it is.
Sure.
As far as, population, geographic size, yes. But it's a pretty small, tight knit community, and it was difficult for an outsider to break in. It didn't take me too long. I was involved in a lot of other outside activities. Hockey, number one. I was heavily involved in the cycling community. I still am a little bit, but not as much as I used to be. And I was a member of the Ambucks club, so those helped me break into those circles that I needed to be involved in.
Tell me if I'm wrong, but Colorado Springs in the 90s when you were there, probably about the same size as Amarillo.
Yes.
Now.
I tell everybody that. They're like, you left Colorado Springs to come to Amarillo? I'm like, yeah, I love Amarillo. Amarillo today is the same size city that I grew up in Colorado Springs. The differences are geographic and hills and trees. Yeah. So that's it. I mean, it was basically the same community.
Colorado Springs was pretty conservative.
Very conservative.
Part of Colorado in the 90s.
Yes.
Air Force Base.
Yeah, Air Force.
A lot of military there.
Air Force Academy, Peterson Air Force Base, Fort Carson, Falcon Air Force Base. You had the Focus on the Family there. You had a lot of other major, large religious organizations that had their national headquarters there. So yeah, it was at that time a very conservative community, as is Amarillo today.
Are you surprised to find yourself here in Amarillo still? I mean, you've built a career here. You've been here for several decades. After just kind of finding your way here, chasing the Boys and Girls Club.
No, I love it here. Raised my family here. A lot of good friends here. So it's home.
This episode of Hey Amarillo is supported by Amarillo Habitat for Humanity, which works with families across the city to provide an alternative path to home ownership. This includes financial stability courses, volunteer construction, sweat equity from the families, reasonable down payments, and no interest loans. It's not a free giveaway, but strong and stable homes help build strong and stable communities. And there are a lot of great nonprofits in Amarillo. We're talking about one of them today with Steve, but Habitat is the only one that focuses on affordable home ownership here in the city. It helps people help themselves, and that's why I really do appreciate this organization. So thanks to Amarillo Habitat for Humanity for sponsoring the podcast. You can learn more at amarillohabitat.org. Okay, I'm back with Steve Burton. Steve, this is part of the show I call 8 Straight. 8 Straight is sponsored every week by Panhandle Plains Historical Museum in Canyon. It's the largest history museum in Texas, and its collection includes a replica of the lighthouse formation of Palo Duro Canyon. You can go in there. It's not life-size, significantly smaller, but it looks just like it. And so you can see how erosion created that landmark. That's at Panhandle Plains Museum, or go to panhandleplains.org. Okay, when you think of Amarillo 10 years from now, what do you hope for?
Well, I would say sustainable growth. I really wouldn't like to see Amarillo grow huge amounts, but growth is, we have to have growth, but it has to be sustainable.
Did that happen in Colorado Springs?
Yes, absolutely.
It was the right kind of growth, or grew too fast and became a suburb of Denver.
Yeah, and it became almost too expensive to live there. Like my mom and sister still live in Colorado Springs. My mom and dad had a house built for them after I'd left. Up in the northeast side, Briargate community. And it was maybe 1,300 square feet, good retirement home for them. And I think they paid $50,000 for it in 1994, maybe. Her tax roll right now is $389,000 on that house. You just can't buy anything.
Yeah.
So I don't want to see that for Amarillo.
Okay.
I mean, we kind of edge towards that, but sustainable growth, good jobs, bringing in, there's some companies moving into Amarillo that are going to bring good high-paying jobs, and that just that helps. But we got to make sure that we have affordable housing for those that have always lived here.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Other than wind, what does this area have too much of?
Coffee shops and convenience stores.
Okay.
Shout out to my buddy Dave Cooper at Roasters. You're doing it good.
Yeah. There's. I don't have any complaints about the homegrown places, Roasters and Palace. Mm-hmm. But then, I keep seeing, a Dutch Bros come
Dutch
in,
Bros,
or Seven Brew, Scooters. I'm just
Scooters.
Who's sustaining all of these?
Yeah. I drink coffee at home every morning. Sorry, Dave. But
okay, what does this area not have enough of?
Trees.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, not enough trees, but anytime I see when we have a lot of trees in our facilities, because the facility's been around for a long time, but when we have to take one down, it just
yeah,
it just hurts my heart.
Did it take getting used to,
yes,
psychologically,
absolutely,
emotionally, just to not be surrounded by that kind of stuff?
Yes, because we had a lot of trees in Colorado Springs, and a lot of trees in Brownwood, and it was a transition.
What's your favorite neighborhood in Amarillo?
Well, when I first moved here, I bought a house in Fox Ridge.
Okay.
A good starting neighborhood. Yeah. Not my favorite, though. We moved.
It was brand new at the time.
It was brand new at the time. Yeah, I had a house brand new built for us. From there, we had another house built for us in the Hillside Terrace, which is where I live now.
Okay.
Great neighborhood. But my favorite place to live, we bought a house out southwest of town on Hollywood, right next to the new Highland Springs area. My daughter and son-in-law live in Highland Springs. And that whole area down there, it's not necessarily a neighborhood, but I loved living out there. Mm-hmm. Loved it.
Kind of out on the edges.
Out on the edge. I had 7 acres. I had a motocross track in my backyard, a rifle range, a pistol range. I had an Airbnb that rented out, an old horse barn that I converted to Airbnb. Had a tractor I just piddle around on, and that was my favorite.
Okay. That sounds nice to me, for sure. What's your favorite local restaurant?
There's so many good ones. I like Six Car. I like X Steakhouse. Okay. It's right by my house.
Town Square.
And Town Square and Cask and Cork. Mm-hmm. Braceros for Mexican food downtown. So those are some of my favorites.
Okay. Other than your own, what's your favorite local nonprofit?
I'd have to say United Way. I've been involved with United Way. I was involved with United Way in Brownwood, so probably since 95, 30 years.
Yeah.
They do good work in every community, but especially in Amarillo. So they're celebrating their 100th anniversary this year as well. So
I don't think people realize the breadth of organizations that depend on the United Way for funding.
Absolutely. There are 12 or 15, I'm guessing now, program providers that partner with the United Way to provide services to the citizens in Amarillo and Canyon.
Okay, what's the most underrated aspect of living here?
I'd have to say the people. I don't know if that's underrated or not, because it's pretty well known that we have a great community. But people from outside may not know that. Our people here are the nicest. I had a lot of Canadian friends come down for the hockey season and come through the community. They all say, the people here are just absolutely wonderful. That was always their first comment about Amarillo.
Okay.
The people.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
Canadians have a reputation for being super nice too.
Absolutely.
So
yes.
Okay. Last question. When was the last time you visited Paladura Canyon?
Oh, it's been 6 or 8 months. I'm a mountain biker, so back when I was racing, I was down there a lot. But don't go that much anymore. I don't ride the bike a whole lot anymore. So,
what was your favorite trail to ride?
GSL.
Okay.
Yeah, GSL was always my favorite.
It's a little more open. Not quite as many trees.
Mm-hmm. You get up on.
You're not going into the riverbeds or anything like that.
You get up on the Buena Vista, and it's pretty exposed. It's more at one time it was the most technical trail out there, and I used to do a big loop to where we do the Capitol Peak and get on the lighthouse, take the lighthouse over to GSL and GSL down, and then Paseo del Rio back, and it was about 18 miles.
Yeah,
I guess.
Make a good loop there.
It was a good loop.
Okay. That concludes the 8 straight questions. I like to close by asking my guests to endorse something. So what's one thing you'd like listeners to know about or to experience?
As an outsider coming into Amarillo, once you're in, you're in. It's a wonderful place to live, raise a family. And, I always hear those that have been here, grew up here, whatever, say, there's nothing to do in it. There's nothing to do in Amarillo. There's nothing to do in Amarillo. Well, there is. It's just not going to hit you in the face.
Right.
You have to go out and look for it. One of the best things I learned in college, being in Gunnison, which is isolated from pretty much the rest of the world, 3 months out of the year because you're snowed in, is if you want to be entertained, if you want to have something to do, you got to go out and find it. Ever since I've lived here, I've been busy. Every day I'm busy. I got something to do every single day because I went out and lived for it. And, I think once people realize that if you're going to wait for somebody to come in and entertain you, you're going to fall to the wayside.
Yeah.
You got to go out and look for it. You got to find things you enjoy doing, find a way to do them. And I guarantee it, you'll find something that you like to do and you will find it, somebody else doing it in Amarillo.
Yeah, I think that's true.
And that goes for any community you live in. Small town of Brownwood, Texas, same thing.
Yeah.
Small town of Rocky Ford, Colorado, same thing. I was always busy. I always had something to do. It's just you have to find it.
Yeah, it's just your mindset. Or am I going to be passive and wait for things to happen to me, or am I going to go figure it out?
Yep. Am I going to wait for George Strait to come play at the Civic Center?
Yeah.
Well, that ain't going to happen.
Yeah.
So you're going to be waiting for a while.
But there's a lot of other good music you could find.
Absolutely.
Or you could travel somewhere and find George Strait. Okay. Steve Burton, thanks so much for being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me. Yep.
And that concludes the episode. I want to say thanks to Steve for the interview. You can learn more about Children's Learning Centers of Amarillo at childrenslc.org. Thanks to Amarillo Habitat for Humanity and Panhandle Plains Historical Museum for supporting the podcast, and to Angelina Marie for editing every week. Thank you for listening. Hey Amarillo exists on a weekly basis because of listeners like you and the local people who support it financially through patreon.com/HeyAmarillo. Hey Amarillo's executive producers include Patrick Burns, Jason Burr, Katie Linger, Corey Burns, Josh Wood, Wes Reeves, Cindy Graham, and Barbara and Jim Whitten. This has been episode 395. My name is Jason Boyett, and I'll see you next week.